Andrew Cohen is an award-winning journalist and former Washington correspondent. The New York Times called him one of Canada's most distinguished authors. He joins us to discuss his book, 2 Days in June, John F. Kennedy and the 48 Hours That Made History. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, among a number of fantastic reviews, says Andrew Cohen has changed the way we regard JFK in 2 days. The book, as much as JFK changed the presidency and the world in those 2 days. The thought that comes to mind for me is this is another reminder that the ink in your history book never dries.
Particularly with JFK. And you know, when I began looking at this, these are events, I recreate the events of 52 years ago in June of 1963. The central issues were nuclear arms and civil rights. And if history has echoes, what are we talking about in America today? Well, President Obama went to American University and talked about nuclear arms. How do we limit, contain nuclear arms and the nuclear capacity from falling into the hands of the Iranians? Civil rights, race in the bomb, race. We're talking about race all the time. But President of University of Missouri just resigned over race. So race and the bomb, which animated John F. Kennedy's life, and what I do is I chronicle the story. I follow JFK hour by hour as he pivots on the two biggest issues of his generation. He does it in two speeches, over 48 hours, in which he humanizes both the Russians because he's appealing to them, and he humanizes what were then called the Negroes, Black Americans, because he's appealing to white Americans to see a way through what was in the heart of the Cold War, at the height of the Civil Rights Movement, a way to address both issues.
And one is a commencement address at AU, and the other is an address from the White House, a televised address.
That's right. That's right.
And you draw a straight line from the June 10th speech to the Test Ban Treaty of '63.
Well, in both cases, John, and this is interesting because we hear a lot about presidential rhetoric, but often it's as empty as can be, and it is as valuable as a junk bond, but not so in this case. The first speech, which you said is a commencement address in American University, June 10th, 1963, the class of 1963, JFK goes to address them. It leads to the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1963, which is the first of the Cold War Armaments Treaty. The second speech before, it's from the Oval Office, it's not outside. Very next night, and it's spontaneous. The other speech had been written in secret very carefully by a very tight circle of people around JFK. He worried if his message of peace were to get out, conservative elements in Congress and in society would attempt to discredit it, so very few people knew about it. So, but it was written very, very carefully and over several weeks, and the themes were, in a sense, test run. The other speech, which is the civil rights speech, it was cobbled together shortly after the Kennedys faced down Governor Wallace at the University of Alabama. It's called the Stand in the Schoolhouse Door, and integrate that university. And that night, JFK goes on the air and he talks about Black America in a way no president ever had before, particularly that white Irishman that John F. Kennedy was. And that leads to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Of course, Kennedy will not be there to see that, but he will introduce that in Congress within 10 days.
Remarkable. And so why now? Why was it possible to tell this story in a way it hasn't been told before? What did you have access to that wasn't previously available?
Well, as we all know, there are many books on JFK. What was different about this book is that I had access to documentary film footage, which was shot by the filmmaker Robert Drew over these 48 hours in the White House, and actually several days before. Robert Drew was an early, what was called then direct cinema or cinema verite, small camera crews, no script, spontaneous, like home movies in a sense, unfolding in a very
reality
granular
TV in its
in a sense
earliest
it was.
stage.
And JFK did something that no one had done before. He allowed the cameras into the White House. So that film was made into a documentary called Crisis Behind a Presidential Commitment, which aired on American TV in October of 1963. But what I didn't know, I knew about the documentary, 52 minutes. I didn't know until later there were scores, tens, maybe even hundreds of hours of unseen documentary footage in Los Angeles, which was given to the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences by Robert Drew in 1999. When I was able to see that, I was able to, and I'm told I am the first to see it since Robert Drew shot it, because it's all outtakes and rough cuts and footage. There, it all unfolded in a way that I felt like an historical voyeur, and I hope my reader feels that way in looking at the book.
It's a cautionary tale to all producers. Don't throw away all that stuff from the cutting room floor.
Never throw
This is
away.
amazing.
And it was wonderful.
Let me shift gears from JFK to one of your previous books, Trudeau's Shadow, and now we have Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada. Some have been calling him a Canadian JFK or a Canadian JFK Jr.
We're already hearing the words Camelot on the Rideau. Rideau is our river, not the Potomac. He does represent a generational change, and I have to tell you, sitting in Ottawa as I do, and observer of politics as I am, and chronicler of the Kennedys as I try to be, I wonder if it isn't the same feeling of optimism in Ottawa now that there was in Washington in 1960, and more recently in this city in 2008 when Barack Obama won the election, and there was a sense of optimism, renewal. We know that it doesn't always last, but in Canada today there have been comparisons, although they're entirely different people, Justin Trudeau and his glamorous wife, Sophie. But there have been comparisons. What is very true is the sense of optimism in Canada and the sense of change and an underdog winning. And he was. They were not expected to win. They were not expected to win big. And there's a lot of talk now about a new era in Canada, a progressive era, an era of ambition again. It uses much of the same language as JFK, ambition, idealism, that kind of thing.
And it's a little early.
And youth.
It's a little early, but it could be the next book.
Well, actually, I'm thinking about it right now for about 3 or 4 years.
Maybe not too early.
Maybe not too early. I hope to be back here then.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Best of luck with the book.
Thanks so much.